Hey everyone, it is episode 263 of 15 with a bunch of guys. There's no Andy, there's a Ken, there's a Randy, and there's a Jeff. So at some point, we're going to have to sit down and talk about this.
Let's figure out how to change this name.
We're going to have to figure out how to change that name because that's it's not working anymore.
It doesn't work for me anymore. No.
It doesn't work for you anymore?
I like Andy.
Yeah, I like Andy.
I like my name. Ken.
But I like Ken too.
Yeah.
So we're going to have to come up with a new idea, and we may make a total change. We may tweak, but know that we will, at least in the feed that you're listening to this right now, even if we change everything, we will let you know before it just cuts off and moves somewhere else.
Well, I think we have to be true to our title, too. I don't think there was ever one episode that was actually 15 minutes or even less. Yeah.
You know, there was
Was there
episode 846. That was the George Floyd episode. Okay. That was 846. So that one was actually 8 minutes and 46 seconds of dead air. Really? If you remember, that was how long it took for him to be killed, and a tragic episode. But there was,
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
There was that, and there was, I think, don't hold me to this, but I think there was one where I had to do it by myself, and it was about 2 a.m. And I'm like, guys, I'm not even editing this, so I'm stuttering, I'm slobbering, I'm doing all these things. You're just getting what you're getting, and it was about 14 minutes and 56 seconds, something like that. So I think we might have made one or two, but that's really all it ever turned out to be. So today we are excited because we get to introduce our new senior pastor here at WholeLife Church, Ken Wetmore.
How's it going?
It is going fantastic. And I'm excited because I think even though we've had a lot of success as far as people listening and engaging, I think it's going to be good to get a new fresh start, a new chance to have another point of view. Not that, again, we all already said we love Andy. So Andy, if you're listening, which I know you're not, then, we still love you. But I'm super excited for the new way we can interact with each other and the new conversations that we're going to be having here on the podcast. And I wanted to start, Ken, your first sentence from the pulpit as senior pastor of WholeLife Church was risky.
You feel like that? You feel like it was risky?
I feel like it was risky.
Okay.
You put everything on the line in a way that you can't take it back.
That's true.
You sold out, lock, stock, and barrel, and you said, Jesus. Jesus is the beginning, he's the end, and he's everything in between, and his name is the first word I want you to hear out of my mouth as your pastor. You can't go back.
I wouldn't want to.
So now it's Jesus or it's not, right?
Right.
So we can be held accountable for that. We can say, if someone says, yeah, but you said,
yeah,
what's your answer to that? Why?
I think I want to be held accountable. I think that it's important as a Christian and as a Christian pastor that I be held accountable to the gospel, which is Jesus. It is all about Jesus. The Old Testament points to him. Everything in the New Testament is about him. And today, he's the reason why we're here. So I think it's important that be the first words out of my mouth. It needs to be the last thing that I say, and it needs to be everything in between. If it doesn't have relevance as it is in Jesus Christ, then I'm not sure it's relevant.
Yeah, it actually follows through with what we talked about last week, actually, on the podcast. I don't know if you had listened to that, but we had talked about the same thing, Randy, last week regarding that everything, in a sense, even everything in the Old Testament, like you said, including the law, actually goes, it's through him that we're able to understand everything that has played out before and after him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. No, I love that because I think if you go into it with that frame of mind, there's never a sense then that we're trying to be anything other than authentic. We're not trying to be anything other than maybe we don't hit the mark all the time. I mean, that's bound to happen. We're human. I mean, I know I don't hit the mark on plenty of occasions when I would really like to say that I have. But essentially, we're just saying if this doesn't look like Jesus, smell like Jesus, talk like Jesus, it's not Jesus. Call us out, right? That's fair.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Because I think that part of it, I know that's something we talked about last week as well, and we do that a lot here. We will – you remember that time? I don't remember what episode it was, but do you remember when we talked about that? I'm going to look that up, and I'll find it in the show notes, and then later on I'm going, why did I say that? Do you know how many episodes I got to look through to find this?
I can tell I have a lot of homework to catch up on. How many episodes did you say there are so far?
This is 263, so we've got a few. So, we could restart and then just start the numbering system all over, and that way we wouldn't have so many.
Exactly.
That would be one option.
That would be one option. And it might be the best option. You never know. But I think we also just talked about that, how authentic it has to be for us to be empathetic and to be that part of Jesus, and maybe one of the most important things we have as followers of Jesus, and to be empathetic, and you have to be transparent. You have to be, this is who I am, as broken as I am, but this is who I want to be. And I think that's so important.
I'm so glad that you started out that way, Ken. I think that a lot of us get caught up, all of us get caught up in certain pieces of the gospel, and we tend to kind of focus on these, even our doctrines or our teachings. We tend to be focused on a particular doctrine that we kind of resonate with or whatever. And if it doesn't lift up Jesus, if it doesn't in a way hold him up as the reason for that doctrine or that teaching, then it probably shouldn't be a doctrine or teaching, because that's what I think all doctrine should be doing, is pointing us to Jesus.
I liked the way that Ty Gibson has framed it, that basically doctrines are windows into understanding Jesus. And sometimes you see Jesus from different angles, and doctrines help us see Jesus from different angles.
Okay.
We all have, as human beings, we all understand that we're very complex, that it's as humans, we want to pigeonhole people, but that's very it's actually very childish to try to put somebody in this little box and say this is who you are all the time, and kind of caricature people. And unfortunately, I think that sometimes as Christians, we all have that side of Jesus that we like to look at best. And the beautiful thing about the Bible and doctrine in general is that if you take a complete look, you get a complete look at the Savior. And there might be aspects of the Savior that you enjoy more than others, but it doesn't mean it's not Jesus that you're looking at if you're getting a true picture of Jesus. And to me, that's what doctrine is about. It's just seeing Jesus from different angles that explain who he is and gives us a broader, more thorough understanding of who he is. And if it doesn't do that, then it can go get on the rubbish heap, because it's not worth anything.
All right. We talked a lot this past week about values. Quick, Ken, on the spot, what were your values at summer camp?
God, integrity, safety, hard work, and fun.
I'm reading off my notes because I wanted to make sure. I had to hold you accountable. You nailed it, even in the right order. And I was trying to, it's gish doof. I was trying to make an acronym, and
there is none. You have to just memorize it. And it was really funny. I actually had one of my staff members had their parent actually attends our church, and apparently they contacted me. They said, I couldn't figure out why my dad was calling me, trying to asking me, we are family and the values are. And this particular staff member had worked for me for one summer, and they couldn't remember. So I guess I would have lost out on that one. But the funny thing was, the staff member told me that as soon as her dad had said, well, what about, and they immediately came back and God, integrity, safety, hard work, and fun. So, yeah.
And Ken clarified right away, he's not a betting man, guys.
No.
So, don't think that he's going to be laying
It's a good thing this is why I'm not, because I would have lost that one, at least with one person there.
So even if it's doctrinally unsound, right now it's just financially better for us.
Yeah. And that's probably part of the doctrine there. It's financially better.
One of the things that you hit on this week, and there was a ton of them, I really felt like it was hard to pick one thing. You had so many good stories, and there were so many feel-good moments. So as a first sermon goes, I think you knocked it out of the park, because many times first sermons seem really awkward, and it's not a opening up of self. And you had tears in your eyes multiple times, and so did I. With the story with your grandfather, lots of bits and pieces of that made me think of both of my grandfathers, which, of course, they're not here anymore. But the one that stuck out to me, and it's always on my top 5 list of why do we do the podcast? Why do we try to be better as humans, as Christian, and how do we treat people in our church community, and how we lead our church community to interact with others, is safety. And I was not expecting you. You said safety, and then you said summer camp, and I'm like, oh, well, yeah, safety, duh. And you're like, you have other people's kids, and it's safety. And then, of course, that physical part, but you said more importantly, emotional safety. You said people need to feel safe, like they're valued. I didn't expect that. Like if they become vulnerable, it won't be used against them. Good grief. Is there a phrase that how many people in our past experiences that we all know, probably people we've actually done it to, without maybe knowing, or maybe we've done it on purpose, that if they become vulnerable, it won't be used against them. That seems like a groundbreaking sentence, and it shouldn't.
It shouldn't, should it?
It shouldn't.
I think that's one of the things that really jumped out at me. I have somebody very close to me in my life who suffered with drug addiction, and we may talk about it more later. I have his permission to share, but maybe not right now.
Sure.
But this person shared with me that they said, Ken, if I never went back to church, I could stay drug free. But if I quit going to my NA meetings, I don't think I would.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's something really. Firstly, I believe the veracity. I think that's very true.
Sure.
For them. But there's something wrong with that too. There's something wrong with the fact that you can be vulnerable in a setting that is secular. In an NA meeting, AA meeting, SA meeting for that matter, you go in there and you can bare your soul to this group of people that you may barely know. And the whole idea is that it will not be used against you, that the people will rather than tearing you down for being that way, they will build you up and help you, hold you accountable. There's a lot of tough love that happens in those 12-step programs. But there's something wrong with it that in those settings, people feel loved and safe, and yet when they come to church and bear the trials and the hardships and the mistakes that have happened, that we then use that as a club to beat them with their own vulnerability. And that's not what church was ever meant to be, I'm convinced of. I believe that church should be that place where
Amen.
If you have a problem, you can come and you can share it, and people won't berate you, won't act like you don't belong in church. We sometimes have this attitude of clean yourself up and then come back to church, and that's really problematic for me, because that's just absolutely not, to me, the Jesus of the Gospels, the Jesus that went out and found the marginalized and those that were suffering and struggling. And so for me, if I'm looking at what I think church ought to be, I think we ought to strive a lot more to be like NA, AA, where we accept people in, understanding that recovery isn't an easy process, and it's not a one step and everything's good again.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think Christians, for those that have never had that path, and there's always the discussion of, yes, you have life experiences that other people can't. And you're like, well, you don't know how much pain came with those life experiences, so don't wish for that. But on the other side, they're sort of ill-equipped to know what to do. As a former alcoholic and someone who couldn't stop drinking, and among other things, part of that culture is when you're there, you're at the bar, you're out with friends, you have that same feeling of acceptance and love. And, on a Friday night, if I wasn't out at the tavern by 9:00, my cell phone was ringing. Where are you? Mm-hmm. I mean, are you okay? Do you need a lift? Everything all right? Yeah. And when I got asked to not be a part of my church anymore because my sins were on the outside, I came to church. I took a shower, but I'm sure it didn't make me smell any better. And it was like, yeah, again, if I'm not there tonight by 9, someone's going to call. And if I don't come back for the next forever, am I going to get a call from anyone here? And the answer is absolutely no, I won't. And no, I didn't. And so I think we're ill-equipped. So how do we do that? Someone that we're talking in this situation where we want them to be safe, how do we know if we're on the right path? Not only just for ourselves and as a staff and as a group of leaders, but how do we know that those conversations, how do we know when our atmosphere is right to make people safe? What does that look like when we can kind of look and you see the people, maybe is it more people that maybe are on the fringe are starting to come to church? Is that a sign? Or how do we know we're on the right path with that?
I'd say uncomfortable.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
If you're uncomfortable, you're probably on the right track.
That's probably not a bad idea. I like that.
I think also remembering, we have such short memories sometimes about how it was for us.
That's true.
I think of my 2 granddaughters. We took them to a small little kind of an amusement, but there was a ride there. And apparently one of the rides, you had to be a certain height. And one granddaughter is a little taller than the other one.
Uh-oh.
And she looked down and she said, well, if I lift you up. And so she grabbed a hold of her and held her and picked her up to that. It was beautiful to see that, because I think we sometimes forget that we once were there, and we sometimes just have to put ourselves again. And again, it goes back to empathy, but remembering what it was like.
Yeah. The other thing I liked about it, you mentioned that we like to think of God, and man, growing up, this was exactly, you were describing my thoughts. We like to see God as the big bad ogre, and Jesus as kind of the, oh man, God's conservative, Jesus is liberal, and he's just here to make everything better because, God just doesn't completely understand you guys, but I got you. And I think that's part of, again, I'm just speaking for myself, that was part of the mindset that put me where I was. And thinking to myself, this Jesus guy sounds pretty cool, but how do I rectify that with the God of the Old Testament? And that's where, typically in those kinds of communities where you're not embraced, that seems to be the norm. And I know that that's not the case here at WholeLife Church. And I think it just made me feel really good to hear the words come from your mouth, that those were like the things that we're talking about, the safety, that Jesus is first and it's all about Jesus, and we need people to feel safe. And I was like, all right, new senior pastor, I like this guy already. I like it. I like the person.
You can keep doing this podcast.
That's right. I approve. I'm Ken Wetmore, and I approve this podcast. Exactly. No, but to hear the theology, it's one thing that we get hung up on methodology, but so often we confuse it with the theology of it, and then you get this ball of things that just they never click. The Rubik's Cube never gets solved because the pieces and parts aren't all the same. And that was just a heartwarming moment for me. It actually brought tears to my eyes as I was sitting there, and my daughter was like, "Dad, why are you crying?" I'm like, "Nah, it's nothing. I'm thinking."
Well, I think it's actually worth taking a moment just to thank the search committee that paired us together, that brought me here, because I really think that it's not an accident that you resonate with what I'm saying, because this is who I am, and they went out and found somebody that would match this church. And for me, I have that same resonance. I started feeling it the second I was here. I was like, yes, this is a place where I feel like I have the same values, and I feel like I see ministry and what a church should be accomplishing in the same ways. Are we going to see some things slightly different here? And of course we are. But the point is that I am really impressed with the job that the search committee did in finding a good match for everybody involved. It's not just that I'm good for WholeLife Church. I feel like WholeLife Church is good for me and my family. And so for me, this is a huge blessing to be a part of this community.
Well, we all have pastoral search committee stories that would just keep you up at night. I know I do. I don't know about the rest of you, but I do. So thank you to the search committee and to all the work that went into that.
It takes a lot of work to find a good match, and I think they did a fantastic job.
All right. Well, since you're so excited, Ken Wetmore, what is our mission at WholeLife Church?
Loving people into a lifelong friendship with God.
You got that right. All right. And our vision?
Our vision, this one's the one that will trip me up here and there. We are a church without walls, and then it's serving our community, wholeheartedly serving our community. This one I'm still working on getting the wording nailed down. Sorry about that.
No, I purposely, when you said, call up my people, they'll know. And I'm like, let's just see how much study and prep work that, Ken has put into making sure that he knows he's all right. Mission was spot on and vision was close enough. To be a church with walls, actively engaged in serving the people of our community. Yeah, I always get the actively engaged. I have to stop and think. I can never just recite it that way perfectly, but
don't worry. Give me a month and I'll have it.
All right, we're going to check in 4 episodes now, so that's going to be what, episode 267. We're going to do a pop quiz for Ken
every week until I get it right.
There we go.
That's awesome. Again, another thing that just really resonated. You said a mission and a vision without values wanders around. If you don't know what your values are, you can wind up achieving your goals the wrong way. You can wind up achieving your goals the wrong way. Man, that is dangerous. That part to me.
Well, that's really insightful, because he's absolutely right. And because if we go down, you can get to your mission,
right?
But you may have a lot of sticky little pieces along the way, because people sometimes can they think they are on this track. We talked a lot about this when we were discovering our mission or going through it. There's this big arrow, so to speak. It's easy to get on that big arrow when you think of the mission, but it's also really easy to trample over people.
There's a
in
lot
the
of fallout,
process,
right? When you said that, I was just like, wow, I would have never put those together in that same way, but it was just so clear and just so.
Yeah, I think that it's been learned painfully the hard way for me, because I think when you're a leadership type A type of personality, there's a real tendency to be very focused on results and outcomes. And when you do that, it's easy, if you lose sight of what your real values are, to violate what really matters. That you're willing to hurt people. You're willing to. It's the ends justify the means, and so you'll do what you need to get to where you're going. But did you really get where you were supposed to be if you've left this trail of destruction, hurt, and pain behind you? And that happens so much within religious communities as much as it happens anywhere else. Is that we have the truth and we're willing to do whatever it takes to get to the truth. And I'm not saying we shouldn't get to the truth, but sometimes when we violate the very principles that are the truth to get to what we think is the end goal, then we've really missed the point of what Jesus is trying to do in our lives.
And that wasn't lost on the GPS analogy that you're like, hey, I didn't need to follow the GPS. I was in my home area in Florida. Yeah, I needed it to get out. But man, once I was back in the Tennessee area, everything was good. And then it's like, wait a minute, why 3 hours? Oh, and then you're just sitting there sitting in my car for 3 hours because I didn't listen to the GPS. And it's like,
so upset. I had to go back to my values.
and it's like, that's always the way it seems to work. And those are lessons we always learn the hard way, unfortunately. But anything you thought of this week that didn't make the end message, hit the cutting room floor? Yeah, I could talk about that, but maybe not. Maybe we'll save that for later.
I really wanted to tell this really humorous story that has absolutely nothing to do with anything, because the title of my sermon is "I Am Ken Wetmore. We are WholeLife Church," and the point that I'm trying to make in my sermon is that when I said I am Ken Wetmore, my grandfather is Ken Wetmore, and so what I'm trying to point out is that I'm kind of a product of my grandfather and my father and the values that they have, and that at WholeLife Church we are WholeLife Church because we're a product of those who have come before us. Easy one to think of is Andy, but there's before him. There are people that have laid the ground. Or was there really? I don't know. I've been told that there might be. So anyway, but my point is, so that was the point where I'm going. But kind of the humorous thing is that I worked in broadcast news for a portion of my career, and my as a reporter, you always have a tag out, reporting for, and I reported for KUAM News and I reported for K57. And so reporting for K57, I am Ken Wetmore was my tag out. And usually it's I'm Ken Wetmore reporting for K57. I'm Ken Wetmore. However, I shouldn't say always. When I started off in broadcasting, I was kind of finding my way, and I was working for this 3 radio station conglomerate. There was a top 40, a classic rock, and a news talk. And each one does news differently. And I won't get into all the differences, but they just have a different tone, different feel.
Yep.
Well, the classic rock station couldn't stand my delivery. Because I had probably more of a news talk delivery. And the manager just kept giving it to me. Wetmore, I need a rock feel. You gotta give me something more than this. Just no, stop. And so I kept trying. I got more and more frustrating. So finally one day at the end of the newscast, I got done reading the stories, got done with the kicker at the end. And so I'd had it. So I said, reporting for the rock, I am Ken Wetmore. And he came, he went to his song. He came flying out of the studio, met me in the hallway. He goes, "That's it. Do that every time. That was it. That's what I'm talking about. Do that every time." So I started doing that every time. Reporting for the rock, I am Ken Wetmore. And so
that's awesome.
So he's giving us some titles.
So the next time, a couple of days later, the top 40 station manager comes to me because I'm reporting for Power 98. I'm Ken Wetmore. And he's like, "Dude, why do you do the cool tag out for the rock, but you don't do that for me?" And I was like, it's over the top. He's like, no, do it. So, okay, reporting for Power 98. I am Ken Wetmore. So before I know it, like a week later, the people at the news talk station are like, hey, Wetmore, why are you doing I'm Ken Wetmore? Your whole thing is you just do I am Ken Wetmore. Do that here too. I was like,
oh, man.
This is news talk. Are you kidding me? So I started doing it. I am Ken Wetmore. Well, I transferred over to television news, and I thought I'm going to be done with this because it's just a lot.
Yeah,
I mean, right?
Much.
It's a lot.
I got you.
So my first night, I do my package, and at the end of it, reporting for KUAM, I'm Ken Wetmore. The news director came and found me after, and she goes, we didn't hire I'm Ken Wetmore. We hired I am Ken Wetmore. Put that at the end of your packages. And so it became this thing to the point where one of my colleagues came back one day from doing a story where there was this whole thing on Guam where they'd built some sort of outdoor basketball court, and they did a dedication. Anyway, the kids were playing basketball on the court, and this kid hit this half-court shot, and he throws his hands up in the air and goes, I am Ken Wetmore.
Oh, man.
And so anyway, that's one of my favorite stories of all time, just because it is.
He is Ken Wetmore, pop cultural icon.
No, on Guam.
No, on Guam. Hey,
if I ever write an autobiography,
that's a whole country.
Famous on Guam.
How many people can say that?
Well, it's actually a territory of the United States, to be quite technical. I'm just
true.
Okay, so all right, so
I think it does actually have a good. That could preach. You could probably.
I think you could end every. You could, when you turn to camera 3 at the end and be like, guys, thanks for joining us. I am Ken Wetmore.
It just feels like more, though, that I really would like it to be about Jesus than about me. So,
change it up a little.
That's true. I suppose.
am a child of God.
Oh, there we go. We can do that.
Richard, if you're listening, we just came up with this whole new way that you can sing this song, and you can thank Ken for that. All right. This past week, we did not have a loop service because we decided, what the heck? Let's give I am Ken Wetmore both services. Let's give him the whole thing, let him do his thing, and he did. But this week, upcoming, because we will be back at 9:30 this Saturday morning with a special guest host. I won't tell you who that might be, but it might be yours truly.
Randy.
And so, Randy. And so be sure to tune in at 9:30. Tune in a little early, and you'll catch a little pre-roll that we do early on. Log into the chat roll if you're on the website, wholelife.church/live. And if you're on Facebook, just go ahead and leave your name where you're watching from early. I'd like to call you out and say hello. And I will be doing the Q&A with Pastor Ken this week. So that's going to be fun. And of course, any questions we don't get to, what's going to happen. We're going to tackle them next week. So there are no questions. So we're going to move to our whole life takeaways. And one of those asked, how do your values align with the values of Whole Life Church? What we've been talking about. Love, acceptance, forgiveness, grace, the Bible, worship, and participation. And how are you practicing those values? So I would love to know which values you have that align, maybe all, maybe one, maybe two. And then how are you practicing them? Because really when we do this together and we can give each other some ideas and some ways about how we do things, that yours might be a strength, same thing might be a weakness, we can practice and share together. So let us know. Use voicemail or text 407-965-1607. Or as an email, always podcast@wholelife.church. Would love to read or share your voicemail on next week's program. Our final thoughts are from the closing to Ken's message. He said, it's all about Jesus. And that's about as perfect as you can wrap up a sermon. So we'll just leave it right there. It's all about Jesus. So next week, we're continuing with This Is Us. And what is our topic?
Love.
That's right. Love. And
the first value at Whole Life Church.
That
Love.
is the first one. Look at that. So are you also like a sequential person? We're just going to take these in logical order or the way they come? Or are we just going to mix them up?
Love, acceptance, forgiveness, grace, participation, worship, and the Bible.
Oh, so right there's your next, we're bad at math. 7 weeks?
Next 7 weeks.
7 weeks. Wow, that was quick. All right. Well, Ken, it was a pleasure to do our first podcast together. I enjoyed it.
We should do this again.
I think, let's plan on that. Maybe next week on Tuesday or something. That
something
might
like that.
Okay. Guys, that's going to do it for this week. Join us on Tuesday evenings, as always, for Speaking of Grace, where you can hear Ken's message. And I really wouldn't miss it because there were heartfelt stories, there was levity, there was fun, and I love hard work, but also let's have some fun. There was a lot of things that we didn't cover. Don't miss that message. It comes out on Tuesday. All the takeaways are there for you to discuss with your friends, family, coworkers, and bring those back to us with questions. And of course, next Wednesday we'll be back. It'll be episode 264. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening and have a great week. I am Randy McGray. Nice. All right, we're out.
Good way to end it.
Oh, man.